In this session, we're going to look at the parable of the prodigal son as found in the 15th chapter of the Gospel of Luke. All this begins with some grumbling. It's the Pharisees and the scribes that are grumbling at Jesus. They're saying, "Why are you eating with the tax collectors and the sinners?" In this time, there was really no worse person you could probably eat with than somebody like a tax collector. Thomas Long says it was hard for people of this era to even say the words tax collector without spitting. For the Romans would let people come in and the highest bidder would get to be the tax collector, often people coming from outside the community. The Romans would say, anything that you can raise above this high tax amount that we've already set is yours. So tax collectors oppressed people. Tax collectors were looked down on, and they preyed on those who were weak and went after those with any resources. Then there's sinners in general who we've already heard from these other studies about how Jews were so precise about who they ate dinner with, and you don't eat dinner with sinners and people that are unclean. Jesus offers three parables, really a trilogy of parables of the lost, to respond to this statement by the Pharisees and the scribes, this grumbling. Jesus first tells the parable of the lost sheep. He says, "Which one of you having 100 sheep and losing one of them does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost until he finds it?" That makes sense to me. I've been mostly a city boy most of my life. I've been around some animals like horses and other animals, but not much around sheep. If I had 100 sheep and one wandered away in the wilderness, I think I'd logically go find that lamb. Why wouldn't I? Yet, I think the person of this era might hear something different. As I've learned more about sheep and talked to those who know more about sheep, I find that sheep are not very smart. If you leave sheep in a pasture and you just let them eat the grass unattended, they're going to, unlike cattle, keep eating and eating. They'll eat down into the roots and do permanent damage. There's some things that sheep will even eat until it kills them. A lot of sheep apparently will just rather try to go through a fence in a dangerous spot rather than go around it. Sheep need shepherds. Sheep are out there in a vulnerable position. All kinds of things can prey on them in the wilderness. Even though it may make sense for us that of course you're going to go get the one that's lost. And in this time people would say that's crazy. If that animal has lost its herd instinct, then let it go. It's not going to live long anyway. Yet Jesus says, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. The next parable is the parable of the lost coin. We find a woman in her home. She initially had 10 coins, a very whole number, just like that 100 we just heard before. But now she's got 9 coins. Each of these coins represents about a day's wage for a laborer. She's lost this one coin. She's seeking this coin. And I think it seems reasonable to look for that coin. Jesus says, what woman would not fervently search for one of the coins if she lost it? Yet, there's not a lot of leisure time in this period. People just weren't sitting around the house watching TV or something or exercising. They had real work to be done. There was labor to be done. A woman in a house like this, in a culture like this, if she spends all of her time looking for that coin, when other people came home who were laboring, they might not have a meal. She needed to be gathering water and preparing food and preparing a fire, maybe washing clothes. There was a price to be paid for that time spent looking for that one coin. Yet, she finds it. In fact, this parable really mirrors the previous parable in so many ways. In both, something is lost, there's a search, it's found, and then there's a celebration. It's not just this one person who celebrates, but there's a community of people drawn in and encouraged to join in the celebration. And then we even hear that there's some heavenly celebration in response to the finding of what was lost. Now we get to the parable of the prodigal son, the primary focus here, but it's all been building up to this. Jesus tells us that there's a younger son who said to his father, "Give me the share of the property that will belong to me." That will belong to me. Really, he's not supposed to have this until his father is dead. It's crazy to even ask for this. It's to dishonor his father to ask for his share of the inheritance prior to his father's death. Yet this father's passive. He gives in. What is he thinking? This father has every right to say, "No, you're not going to dishonor me that way. You have no right to take your share of the inheritance now." It appears that there's two sons here, and so this is the younger son. The eldest son would get a double share of the inheritance, and the younger son would get his share, so he'd get a third in this case, and the eldest son would get 2/3. For the eldest son, there was more honor, but there was also responsibility. He had to care for his mother. He had to care for any female siblings who weren't married yet, and so that's part of why he got more. Yet, what happens is this younger son takes his share of the inheritance. It's said that he goes to distant country and he squandered his property in dissolute living. If we look a little more precisely at verse 13, a very literal translation of that, and it's wordy. This is why we don't have an exact literal translation. But the wordy translation is that he wasted the estate of him living prodigally. Wasted the estate of him living prodigally. We hear that word prodigally. That's where the title comes from, of the prodigal son. It's the only time in the New Testament that word is used that means prodigal. Prodigal means wasteful. It means riotous and reckless. Clearly, this younger son has acted in ways that are not wise. Now later we hear his elder brother say that he spent this on prostitutes, at least in part. Maybe not. The eldest brother, there's no indication that he knows where his brother has been or what his brother's been doing, and siblings who are as angry as this brother is when he says that maybe are not the most reliable source. Maybe that happened, maybe it didn't, but there's no question that this youngest son has acted in a way that's immature, in a way that's unwise and reckless. So we see the son then lose everything he's got. He's got nothing else, and so there's a famine in the country, in the place where he's in, and he's got to get a job. He seeks a job, and his employer sends him to take care of pigs. Not really a job that was okay for a Jew generally, because these animals were considered unclean. Yet he's so hungry. He observes these pigs and he wishes that he could eat the same food even that they ate, but he can't. And in the midst of his starvation, he begins to reflect on what he can do. He says, "I could go back home. The laborers for my father, at least they have all the food that they can eat. I'm hungry. I'm going to go back home and just offer to be a laborer for my father." He doesn't even consider the shame that may come with that. On his way back home, he starts rehearsing what he's going to say. Many of us can imagine doing that. All this intense emotion he's going back home. What am I going to say to Dad? I got to kind of plan out what I'm going to say. Here's what he rehearses. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands." The text states that while he was still far off, his father saw him. It's speaking there about the youngest son. He's far away, yet his father's seeking him out. What we see is there's no longer the passive father there. We see a string of active actions. The father runs to greet him. The father hugs him, and the father kisses him. The son never gets to say, "I'm sorry," or "I've got this plan about me being one of your laborers, if you'll just let me do that, and I'm hungry, Dad, just feed me." Instead, the father's acting. He's bestowing a robe on the son, a sign of great honor. He bestows sandals, another sign of honor. He lays this honor at his son's feet. His son's already decided that he's no longer worthy to be called son anymore. Yet he's received with great grace and love by his father. The text even speaks of his father having great compassion and being overcome by compassion. Yet, the scenes change. We see things shift to where the eldest son is in the field. He's been working hard, and he's coming back in from the fields, and he hears some sounds and sees some things. He hears music, and he observes dancing. He asks somebody else what's happening, and he's told that your brother has come and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has got him back safe and sound. Boy, the eldest son is fuming at this point. This isn't right. This isn't fair. What is he thinking? The eldest son refuses to go into this party. Why would he have any part of that? The father has to come out and seek him. And then that eldest son protests to his father intensely and says, "Listen, for all these years, I've been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends." You might notice there, if you listen closely, that he refers to his brother as that son of yours. Listen now to how the father responds. He says, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found." For the father, this is not only finding the lost son, but this is resurrection. For the son was dead and is now alive again. I encourage you to take a look at this trilogy of parables, to reflect on what this says about God. Who is God? What kind of grace does God offer? What kind of compassion does God offer? What kind of love runs deep through God? And then consider what God is calling you to do. Take a look some more at some text that's down below. Look at some of the questions that you'll find down at the bottom of the page and reflect on those. I encourage you to write a few comments at the bottom of this page and share those with others. I'd like to thank you for being part of this study, for being engaged. Thank you for journeying with me.